Do you know anything about lying? We were taught from childhood that lying is bad, that you cannot lie. You should always tell only the truth. But is it always right? And what does it mean to lie for good reason? I didn't understand that phrase very well until I came across it myself. In general, we will talk now about my sister. Don't jump to conclusions. Just listen to me until the end. My name is Jolie. I am the youngest child in the family. I have a sister, Abby, who is older than me by only 2 years, but we don't really communicate. We don't fight, we don't argue, we don't have any particular differences, but nevertheless, we are a little distant from each other. Previously, this was not the case, but everything changed 2 years ago. It's like there's this abyss between us that she's crossed and I haven't. It was as if I had stayed behind, and every year, the distance between us was getting longer. I won't hide the fact that Abby and I were no longer in close contact with each other. As a child, I remember very well how we were friends, and she loved me as much as I loved her. We grew up, shared secrets, built a tent out of blankets in the room. I told her what I dreamed about, and she shared the same with me. And even though everyone said we didn't look alike, we didn't care. Is it only the outward resemblance that makes us sisters? No, we were born that way. That's all you need to know. Abby used to stick up for me on the street when we were playing with other kids. I knew she would always protect me, so I wasn't afraid to get into trouble. In private, of course, she scolded me for being wrong, but only in private. That's what I liked most about her. And then, everything changed. I remember that evening. She and our parents were arguing about something. Abby was crying, and I went into the house after a meeting with my friends, and they all immediately fell silent. No one told me anything. My mother said that Abby was just in a bad mood, and Abby herself has not really communicated with me since then. I've tried to get her to talk many times. I went to her room, caught her at home, tried to talk to her at dinner, but she didn't say anything. And then I found out that she signed up for the swimming section and goes there. I asked her why she didn't take me with her, but she just shrugged. She said she wanted to go there alone. It was terribly unpleasant and painful because we were so close. Despite her cold attitude, my attempts to restore our connection did not end. I did it, if not every week, then every holiday, especially at Christmas. All Abby said was that it was time for her to start training. She used to go swimming a lot, and I knew it would be good because she couldn't swim at all. As much as I had tried to teach her, she was afraid of the water, so I thought it was really cool that she went to train. I endured and waited. So 2 months passed, then 6, then a year. You can imagine, for a whole year, almost never talking to the person with whom you live under the same roof. I knew my parents weren't telling me something, but I didn't push them to tell me. I thought that if they decided, they would say it themselves. However, this never happened, and my sister and I stupidly became neighbors or roommates. Gradually, I began to physically get used to the fact that she was almost not around. All she said was that she was at practice. Are you preparing for a competition? Why do you train so hard and for so long? You can probably swim faster than a shark already, I said jokingly, but she didn't even smile. I have to go, was all she said, and it was the only phrase I'd heard from her mouth for almost a year. The house was so quiet. There was no longer a mess because of our tents. No one turned on the music to annoy the neighbors. No one watched movies until late at night. I missed her. But the straw that broke the camel's back was the day that she almost missed my birthday. My family and I had decided to celebrate outside, by the pool. My mother had prepared a delicious meal. My father had built a tent, so it should have been cool. Abby was 3 hours late. Not only that, but by that time, we had almost eaten everything with the other guests. So she came dissatisfied, did not hug me, just sat down and began to eat the leftovers. Is everything all right? Don't you want to hug me and congratulate me? I asked her. She looked at me with dull eyes and was like, "Happy birthday." That's all. That's all she said. The guests felt the tension and wanted to diffuse the situation. They started jumping into the pool and shouting loudly. I was having fun. I took Abby by the hand and dragged her into the water. She screamed that she couldn't swim. Very funny. You've been swimming for almost 2 years. I said, and jumped into the water with her. A minute later, I saw Abby floundering in the water. She was trying to get out, but she didn't have enough air and was really drowning. I thought she was kidding me. How can a person who has been swimming for years drown? It wasn't until my father jumped into the pool and pulled her out of the water that I realized something was really wrong. Abby cleared her throat and then called me a fool because she could have died. Am I a fool, or do you take me for a fool? Didn't you spend all your time on swimming training for the last 2 years? Weren't you the one that told me that you go there because you want to learn how to swim? You're not in my life anymore. You've been absent all this time. What have you been doing? Where have you been? It seemed that all my accumulated anger exploded at that moment. I felt myself shaking, but not from the cold. It was from anger. The guests quickly understood the situation and left for home, leaving me alone with my parents and Abby. She paused and then said that she had lied to me and my mom and dad, that she had not gone to training, but that she was actually visiting her real mother. What? What is this nonsense? What are you talking about? But my mother said that she knew everything from the very beginning. That day when they'd had the argument, and I was at my friend's house, my mother and father told Abby that she was an adopted daughter. But even I didn't know about it. They raised her as their own. They thought they couldn't have children. But after the adoption, I came along, and my parents were happy. But not long before the truth was revealed, her real mother showed up at our house. She was a drug addict, but Abby was still drawn to her. They arranged meetings, and Abby didn't want to tell my parents about her because she thought they would forbid it. But as it turned out, my mom and dad already knew. We talked for a long time afterwards. My sister was embarrassed in front of me because she felt like a stranger as soon as she found out about the truth. And then I went up to her, hugged her, and told her that I had never had a better friend, a sister, because I loved her with all my heart. And that is the main thing. Tell me, guys, did you like my story? Write your opinion in the comments below the video. Do not forget to like it, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel.
Hello, everyone. My name's Dick. I don't even know where to start with my story. Anyway, I found out my sister's secret, and I still can't get over the shock. I hope that you'll watch my story to the end and write comments under the video. Watch, like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I have a sister. Her name is Haley. She's extremely kind and good. Haley was always responsive, and many people loved her for that. There was never a time when she didn't volunteer to help someone. Her parents managed to raise her like this. Maybe that's why she's always been surrounded by people like that. Haley had a lot of friends, but of course, there were those who were jealous that she was like this. Her best friend was Lilith. They had been friends since elementary school. I still remember Lilith coming to our house for a sleepover, and it happened often. Unfortunately, her family was not like ours. Haley said that Lilith often gets home from her mother and stepfather. My sister even said once that she felt that adults were deliberately bullying her. Haley felt sorry for her, and she loved her more than anyone, which is why she helped her in everything, including financial support. For me personally, Lilith was basically not bad, but this girl often got into bad situations. Always adventures found her, and along with this, my sister suffered. And no matter how much our mother forbade her to communicate with her, Haley still stood up for her friend. If I turn my back on her, she'll have no one left. I won't allow it, she said. One day, Lilith came to us in the middle of the night. She was crying. She was shaking all over. As it turned out, her stepfather and mother drank a lot and began to take it out on her. They told her a lot of nasty things and forced her to clean up after them, forced her to beg on the street and buy alcohol for them with this money. Haley repeatedly interfered in their family affairs. She demanded that they change, even threatening the police. But they didn't take her sister's words seriously. I understood that she was worried about her friend, but on the other hand, I was terribly annoyed that she was picking at the dirty laundry of her friend's family. And I kind of felt like one day their friendship was going to go sideways for Haley. It seemed to me that either she would have a bad influence on her sooner or later, or my sister would still get into specific trouble. And just a couple of months later, both happened. Our parents gave Haley a car. It was old, but it was still good. My sister was beside herself with happiness. I had persuaded them to give her such a gift for graduation. I felt that she deserved it, because for so many years, there was not a single comment or bad assessment in her address. Mom and Dad were proud of her, so they agreed. As soon as my sister successfully passed all the exams and entered college, she and her classmates decided to have a party in honor of it. I agree the occasion is gorgeous. Haley didn't really want to go there, but Lilith was upset about her mother again, and they persuaded her friends to get some air. My sister agreed. In general, that evening, they went to the party. They were gone for a very long time, and my mother was already beginning to worry. As the clock ticked past midnight, my mother started calling my sister, but she didn't answer the phone. It was strange because she had never been out so late before, and she had never ignored the phone calls. I felt anxious inside and couldn't sleep, and then I heard the front door open. Haley came into the house. Her face was gone, and she looked as pale as if she had seen a ghost. My mother and I were very scared. We started asking if everything was okay. I saw that something had happened, but she didn't tell me anything. She said that everything was fine and that she said she was tired, and then went to bed. We were supposed to go to the school next morning. Haley woke up and didn't eat breakfast. As soon as we opened the door, we saw that the police were standing on the threshold. Haley looked nervous. The parents came out and they began to ask whose car was parked at the house. It was my sister's car. There was a dented bumper, and my father pretended to know that he had hit the car when he was driving into our garage. As proof, he showed a dent in the garage wall, which is already 4 years old. They apologized and left. It was clear that a serious conversation was waiting for them. But to a lot of questions, Haley just said that she had parked the car on the side of the road. Who dented her and when she didn't know. Because of this, I was afraid to go home yesterday. I'm terribly ashamed. I really didn't know how it happened, she said, and then began to cry. Her father and mother calmed her down, saying that the main thing was that no one was injured. I got in the car and we drove to school. She didn't say a word on the way. I asked her, but she said she didn't hear me. I asked the question again, and she seemed distracted from her thoughts. She said that everything was fine, gave me a strange smile, and continued driving. After a second, I realized I'd lost my phone, so I asked her to call mine. And when I picked it up, there was a message from Lilith. I still dream about yesterday's accident. I hope this man is alive. But what if he isn't? At the moment, I was paralyzed by terrible thoughts. Oh no, Haley hit a man, so the cops asked about the car. Then Haley said that the phone was lying under my feet. I handed her the phone and picked up mine. I was still replaying her friend's message in my head. She stopped in the parking lot and we went to class. I've been thinking about one thing all day. What if she knocked him to death? I have to tell my parents about everything, I thought. When I got home from class, Haley was already home. I went up to her and asked her directly, I know what happened yesterday. Don't you want to tell me anything? She suddenly jumped up from the sofa and began to justify herself. I didn't mean to. I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't mean to. She cried in tears. My mother heard this and came up with the question, what didn't you want? The nurse hesitated and then said that she hit a man yesterday. What? And you're only telling me this now? My mother asked. Haley started crying, started making excuses. She said that Lilith called an ambulance, but she didn't know if this person was alive or not. My mother became hysterical. It was a long conversation. Then my mother got ready and went to the hospital to look for the victim. When we left the house, Lilith came up with us. She was also pale. When she found out we were going to the hospital, she tried to talk me out of it. Like, if he recognized Haley, the police would come. But Mom said they needed to find out. Lilith came with us. Everyone was silent all the way, and there was tension in the car. Suddenly, Lilith asked, what if he was dead? My mother said sharply that it was necessary to sort everything out. She suddenly stopped in the middle of the road, turned to the girls, and demanded to know everything. Lilith was silent with her head down, and Haley told me that she'd had a few drinks yesterday and hadn't noticed anyone crossing the road. I saw him late, hit the brakes, and then I got scared and drove away, Haley said, wiping away tears. My mother was very angry. She started screaming in the car that she should have called her. I saw my sister crying. And if Dick hadn't found out, would you have kept quiet? What if that person was hurt very badly? What the hell were you thinking? When we finally arrived at the hospital and somehow found the man and my mother entered the room, they were met by policemen. The girls turned even paler. The policeman came up with the words, what are we doing here? After all, our father hit the car a long time ago. My mother was at a loss for an answer, and Haley confessed everything. She lowered her eyes and told us the same thing she had told us. We were in shock. The police officer said that you'd have to arrest her for driving under the influence. hitting a person, and fleeing the scene of the crime. My mom started begging me to talk about everything, and she started crying, and Haley didn't say anything, and I was terrified. A few minutes later, when she took his sister's arm and was about to lead her away, Lilith screamed that it was her. I shot it down. I asked for her car, not knowing how to drive. She stood up for me. She said and began to cry. The cop made a face. "Where's the proof?" he asked. Then the man came out of the room and he immediately pointed at Lilith. He had a bandaged hand. "You were the one who hit me yesterday. I recognized you," he said, pointing at Lilith. Mom and I both breathed a sigh of relief. It was a good thing he only got off with a bruise. Oh, my sister was even willing to go to jail for her friend. Well, then there was a lot of trials, to be honest. I didn't think Haley was that kind. What would you do in her place?